Okay, and now we'll take a roll call. Committee member Donna De La Rosa.
I'm here.
Chair, the clerk takes the roll.
Okay.
Okay.
Committee member Donna De La Rosa.
I'm here.
I'm sorry. Committee member Cass.
Here.
Committee member Tripp. I don't see her online. Vice Chair Holden.
Here.
And Chair Reynolds.
Here. Okay, so we do have a quorum. Unfortunately, Ms. Tripp is not here. So now it's time for the public communications section of this meeting. And so any member of the public may address the Citizen Oversight Committee for a period not to exceed 3 minutes total on any item listed on this agenda. The Citizen Oversight Committee will listen to all communications. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the committee cannot act on items not on the agenda. Could the clerk advise as to whether there are any members of the public in the meeting?
No, we have no one on the line.
Okay, well, there's no one here to make public communications, so now we move to the consent agenda. There is one item on the consent agenda today, and that is to approve the minutes of the Citizens Oversight Committee for City Revenue Measures regular meeting of Wednesday, November 10th, 2021. City staff's recommended action is approve the minutes as submitted or revised. So if anyone would like to make a motion on that. Okay, so I would move this committee to approve the item 1 on the consent agenda. If there are no objections, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's a unanimous vote, and item number 1 on the consent agenda is approved. So the next item on the agenda is in regular business, and I do not recall that this committee scheduled this item on the agenda. I believe this was done at either the City Council or City Staff's initiative. But the second item on the agenda is a Citizen Oversight Committee overview by Mayor Lee and City Attorney Hale. And before we begin that, I just want to note that this committee does have a lot of fine details to discuss today. And time is of the essence since we are to make a decision today. So with that in mind, if Mayor Lee would like to proceed, then that would be great.
Mayor Lee, are you there?
Actually, I apologize. My headset was just. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the committee's time and indulgence, as it has been my practice to introduce myself and say welcome to each of the committee members as part of the one of your first meetings. I didn't get a chance to do it at the last meeting, so I appreciate the time and your indulgence right now. I do realize that as with all staff and committees, there is an action that is necessary for you to take this evening or this afternoon. So I do appreciate the time, and I realize you guys can't see me. So why can't you see me?
I can see you.
I can see you.
Oh,
Very
there you are.
Thank you very much. So again, I do know some of you. I don't know all of you, but I appreciate and want to say thank you for the service that you're providing to the city of Grover Beach and the time and the effort that you've put into reviewing the materials. I do want to just kind of give a kind of a quick perspective, perhaps. And one of the things that that people always ask me as I'm out in the community, what's it like to be a mayor? And I say, I'm one vote. I'm one person on a 5-member panel of the city council. And so everyone has the opportunity to have elected and to serve and to volunteer on committees, but everyone also has that one vote, and so you bring that perspective. So I appreciate the perspective that each of you bring as individuals. So, and as a just kind of a precursor, or maybe a perception from a council perspective, is this commission was created, or this committee was created as a result of our tax measures that have come forward. And the commission is a reviewing commission, not a creating commission. And so we as the council look forward to your recommendation and your review of the materials that are brought forward. And so in talking with staff and in talking with our city attorney, and going back through the perspective that the council has had, is we've provided the direction to staff and the operating elements of the committee to provide the information that the council is requesting you review, and that the tax initiatives have initiated for you to review that, so that you can take a look at the ballot measures and the information that's provided to you in order to make that recommendation. So just want to give you that little bit of perspective from a council standpoint, and appreciate the service and the fact that you're willing to volunteer your time and your effort and your skill for this committee and the oversight. So with that, I'll turn it back to the chair and say thank you very much, and I'll be around for just a couple minutes in case there's any specific questions on the purview, or you might have questions for me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lee. And out of fairness, I do not want to omit Mr. Hale, who's also included on this item. Would Mr. Hale like to make any comments to the committee?
Sure. Thank you very much. As all of you know, I'm the city attorney for the city of Grover, and I have participated in many of these ordinances and resolutions throughout the years that have established the guidelines and the direction of council related to this particular committee. We have had a number of questions that came up in the last committee meeting, and in the interim between then and now, related to what the role of this committee is and what the intent has always been. For the most part, although the particular resolution 2047 is one that created a consolidation of this committee as a product of the previous committee and the future interest of the council, did so and enumerated in the whereas provisions related to the TOT, which is one of many revenue bond deals. Or revenue measures that were passed, that an annual report is to be put together. State law requires an annual report that be put together. We had a discussion earlier today related to what those statutes require. The bond ordinance itself related to K14, which will be a topic of discussion, I assume, today, number 14-05. Set forth the parameters for which the city issues a bond and implements that implementation of that bond deal, and specifically it required that an independent audit citizens oversight committee be created, and that's what you are. The discussion that we're going to have probably is what exactly is the extent of that overview. Historically, the overview has been, since its inception 7 or 8 years ago, was that the committee would receive an annual report, which is required by state law. That annual report is functionally a summary of the bond proceed expenditures. What you have before you today is exactly that document of those proceeds and expenditures that have been that have taken place on this particular bond deal. Going back for the last fiscal year. And that's the committee's function. It has been the function since its inception. Previous expenditures have already been approved. You're looking at this year's expenditures and you have that before you. There has been an interest on the part of some members of the committee to go deeper than what you have before you. What has been historically the practice has been to take these expenditures and evaluate them against what the purpose and objective of the bond deal is, and that is defined and required by state law to be defined in the annual report. which you have again before you. To go beyond that analysis is not characteristic or consistent with what has been historically the practice of this committee, nor than, in my opinion, from my office, of the legal requirements of the city to present you with additional background information that is done by our auditors. One of the requirements of this bond deal is an independent audit that is done by our auditors. Those auditors go to a significant level of detail in evaluating those expenditures of this particular bond deal, for instance. They give us a clean, and we have had historically a clean write-off from the auditors in that audit report. One of the concerns I think that has been expressed in some of our previous discussions is if this function of the committee is intended to go further than an analysis simply of these expenditures being consistent with the purpose and objective of the bond, you're duplicating what our auditors do, which has a number of impacts to the city, both the staff, time, and expenses, and is not consistent with what our direction has been from council previously, nor what we understand it is to be to date. So that is sort of a legal summary from my office's perspective of where this commission or committee has been in the past and where we are today. And I'll certainly entertain any questions, or we can continue on with that discussion if the committee chooses. I'll defer back to the committee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hale, for that insightful explanation. So now we're at the third item on the agenda today, which is the review of measures X06 and F20, transactions and use tax revenues and expenditures for fiscal year 2020 to 2021, and review of measure K14, expenditures and projects for fiscal year 2019-2020. The recommended action by city staff is to continue review of information provided at the November 15th, 2021 meeting, provide direction to staff for the preparation of a report to the city council. So this item on the agenda is the opportunity for the members of this committee to have discussion amongst itself. And I would invite any committee member, if you would like to ask questions of any city staff or the accountants who I believe are present here before the first round of discussion, to please proceed.
So, are we talking about K14? I'm sorry.
Yes, we were talking, or at least the focus of what I would like to talk about will be K14, but obviously if we want to talk about everything else, the committee members can certainly raise those matters.
Okay, I only have the one question. We found an error in I assume it was the auditor's report. So is there an explanation on what the tissue dispenser is actually?
Yes, Ms. Holden, we'll be able to discuss that. And by extension, I'd like to just recognize that we have Admin Services Director Deanne Purcell, who is the lead staff for this item, to speak to that and other questions. And also, we have Aaron Nagel, who is with the outside audit firm Glenn Burdett, which prepared the audited statements that we provided the committee as part of the annual comprehensive financial report. And Ms. Nagel can also speak to the audit process that goes on at the city and the rigorous review that the auditor does in reviewing expenditures and transactions as part of their independent third-party process. But with that, Ms. Purcell, could you provide a little bit more clarity on this tissue dispenser and what we found out in looking into this with staff?
Yes, I can. So good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. I did look into that tissue dispenser, and it was an inadvertent error on the staff who input the description. What they did is they copy and pasted the description from the prior invoice that they had entered. Sometimes when they're entering invoices, they enter a few with the same description. So it was an inadvertent error that happened. It was in the second line of the description. So when we looked, we do a review of our accounts payable. It didn't show up in the first line of the description, but it did show up in the general ledger detail. But we did make our staff aware of that. And we've put them on alert to be very careful of the way that they type their descriptions, to no longer and copy paste a description, but to make sure that they're putting in the correct description. So we did talk to the staff members that were involved, and also the director who would review the invoices. And so everybody's aware. Again, it was an inadvertent error. It was not an incorrect expenditure that went into Fund 20 that shouldn't have. It was a legitimate expenditure, but it just had an inadvertent typing error on the description.
So what was it? 300 some dollars, did you say? I mean, you can kind of, we found this so you can understand why we're questioning it.
Yes.
So what was that 300 then? 394, whatever it was. Did you say what it was?
You know what? I'll have to go back and pull the invoice. I think, Matt, do you recall?
Yes, it was for a pavement. It was for pavement condition assistance. That was the contractor that we worked with, and so it was tied to the street program with pavement condition work we were doing. But again, it was an inadvertent copy and paste error, which occasionally can happen in the thousands of transactions that we run each year. But again, we are taking steps to make sure that we minimize the frequency of that happening, so that we don't have that happen again. So we appreciate the question, and that's a good example of the oversight role of asking questions and providing a response back to the committee.
I am satisfied if you are, Chair.
I have quite a bit more to go into if my colleagues would be so kind as to indulge me. But again, I want to, Mayor Lee made a good point. This is a committee of 5 people, and you each can make decisions with your own independent judgment. And any of you at any time can move to approve any item on the agenda with or without my consent. And I don't want anyone to feel pressured into voting a certain way. I just want to have some discussion about what I personally have come to find and the questions that are in my mind as a result thereof. And so at this point, there's going to be discussion amongst committee members, and I would just, as an abundance of caution, I would ask that that city staff not interject and wait for a question to be asked if they find that there is something that they'd like to comment during this discussion. If you could reserve those comments till we've had some discussion amongst ourselves. And so with my fellow committee members, I want to make a couple of points here. It is my view that good governance begins with the adherence to principles, and we lose good governance when we stray away from those principles. And one of the principles that I am going to adhere to today is the principle that I cannot endorse something or subscribe to something that I either do not understand or cannot confirm that it represents what it is told as representing. So if I cannot understand what something is, then I cannot put my name on it and endorse it. And that's just my personal principle. And so with that in mind, I want to direct my colleagues' attention to the language in the resolution 14-05 that created the K-14 revenue measure. And to be clear, I want to reiterate that I am focusing solely on K-14 for the purposes of this discussion. And this was put to the voters on a ballot proposition. So at the polls, the voters had a question that they said yes or no to. And I'm going to read that question. To rehabilitate, resurface deteriorating residential and major streets to improve drivability, maintain emergency response times, enhance safety for pedestrians, bicyclists, drivers, neighborhood school crosswalks, and promote economic job growth. Shall the city incrementally issue up to $48 million of bonds at tax-exempt interest rates, requiring funds go directly into the street construction designated fund with all funds used exclusively for Grover Beach streets, subject to independent audits and a citizens oversight committee. So that is the question that was provided to voters, and voters said yes to. They said yes to issuing bonds. They said yes to requiring the funds go directly into the street construction designated fund. And they said yes to all funds being used exclusively for Grover Beach streets. Now, in ordinance number 1505, I want to bring your attention to section 10, the accountability requirements. And I think that this is, the most important section in this ordinance for our discussion. As the oversight committee, part of our job is to hold the city accountable. And for us to hold the city accountable, we have to have information presented to us in a sufficiently organized and accurate way for us to know where they need to be held to account. So section 10A states, a separate account called Street Construction Designated Fund shall be created and held by the city, into which the proceeds of the bonds are deposited. And I want to note that Street Construction Designated Fund is capitalized, and it is expressly stated that the bond proceeds must be put into that account. Now, this is an issue of nomenclature, but it goes to this committee's ability to conduct oversight. I spoke with the city manager, the city attorney, and Ms. Purcell this morning, and we had a discussion about this. And the conclusion was that there is a nomenclature issue because the words Street Construction Designated Fund appear nowhere in the auditor's report or in the financial statements that staff produced to the committee. There is not an account called Street Construction Designated Fund. And because there's not an account called Street Construction Designated Fund, this committee is then left to try and figure out which account of a different name was created with the intention to serve this purpose. So it puts us on an additional quest of trying to identify which account that the city is saying complies with section 10A of ordinance 1405. And so there is no account that is called Street Construction Designated Fund. Now, section 10C under the accountability requirements states a citizen oversight committee composed of 3 voters of the city of Grover Beach shall be formed and will be charged with an annual review of, quote, all bond proceeds expenditures and an annual report to the city council regarding their findings as to those expenditures. And again, I had discussion with city staff earlier this morning and asking if the trial balance that was provided to us last time represented all bond proceeds expenditures for K14. And it is the city staff's position that K14, all of its expenditures are encompassed in the trial balance that we received prior to the last meeting. And so if that's the case, then what this committee must do is determine if all of the transactions in that trial balance are transactions exclusively for the streets of Grover Beach. And so we discussed some of the transactions before. The one that has become the common topic has been the tissue dispenser. Well, that's just one transaction. And so where the statute says that we need to review all bond proceeds expenditures, that led me to the question of, okay, what are all bond proceeds expenditures? And as I look at the trial balance report, I cannot determine if many or most of these transactions are for street improvements. And it's 2-part. I can't determine it, one, because of the transaction descriptions as they exist, and 2, because of a pattern of errors in the entry of data transactions. So assuming the information presented is all accurate, can't determine if it is related to the city streets based on what's provided. And if it's not accurate, we can't determine because we don't have accurate information. And as I look through these line item transactions, I do see that there are some that share a description that says measure K. And I assume it's K14. In some of the descriptions, it does have the 14 in there. Yes, measure K14. And so that led me to the question of, if some of these are marked as measure K14 and all of these are supposed to represent K14, why are the others not marked as K14? And how do payroll expenses, advertising in a newspaper, a tissue dispenser, if that, that was what it was, how do these things relate to street improvement? And so we are asked to vote yes or no on adopting the report as submitted. And if we vote to adopt the report as submitted, we are endorsing it with our committee's seal, and we are subscribing to it and saying that, yes, this is a complete, honest, and accurate representation of all bond proceed expenditures. Yet, I'm not sure if anyone will be able to confidently say, yes, this indeed is all bond proceeds expenditures, and all of these transactions are for street improvements. And I hope everyone's had the opportunity to review the 200 plus pages of documents that we've received. I know we've received most of these within the last week, but I personally have spent many hours with these documents at this point, reviewing everything in great detail, including the auditor's report and their explanation of their processes. Now, I think that it would behoove us to have some discussion with the auditors about the processes just for further insight, but I don't know that any discussion today can change whether or not each member of this committee truly feels that the report is accurate, complete, and all items contained therein are for street improvements pursuant to K14. And likewise, the issue of nomenclature is one that is not necessarily up for dispute, and the committee can rest assured that the city has not created a separate account called Street Construction Designated Fund into which the proceeds of the bonds were deposited. That account does not exist. So we know that this committee has a duty to hold the city accountable with complying with the text of the statute as it's written, especially so when the text is clear and unambiguous. And at this point, I would invite my colleagues to comment or question, and let's have discourse about these issues.
Well, I have a question. I don't know, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is Paula. When Ann and I first started on the committee way back when, we just did the oversight of the road committee, and they provided us with reports that were just for K14, right, Ann? It was just those. That's the only thing that we ever looked at. We didn't get involved in any other financials, and so there was an accounting system for just that section of it. So I don't know if it's changed or whatever.
Well, in my discussion with the city staff, they did indicate that the trial balance we received last time was exactly that this was the organization of all K14 expenses. Does this document look different in organization than the one that you're familiar with from before?
No, I don't think so. I think it looked the same. We just didn't have all the other committee stuff in it. We only had K14. And does it look different? Because I remember that we would.
Yeah.
No,
No, it doesn't.
And just let me add just for a second, just for context, Chair. Ms. Tripp and Ms. Holden were on the K14 Oversight Committee just for the bond measure. And then in 2019, when we merged it with the revenue measures, we then that committee had been defunct at that point, and so hence we had the expanded committee we have today. So Ms. Tripp and Ms. Holden did just look at the K-14 information, and it was the same list of expenditures in the same format that we have today before the committee.
Okay. So another historical fact I want to note here is that ordinance number 1405, which created K-14, the ballot proposition, is signed by a different city attorney, a different mayor, a different city clerk, and that there were only 2 members of the council at that time who currently sit on the council. And so the present city staff and the present city council as a whole is not equipped to actually say what the intent of that city council in 2014 was. And you know, I think we have to give the benefit of the doubt to the city council that existed in 2014. They thought that it was necessary to include a section on accountability requirements. And they thought it was necessary to create a committee and charge it with an annual review of all bond proceeds expenditures. So that city council and the people of River Beach who voted yes on this intentionally put this accountability requirement in there, and they intentionally used the words review of all bond proceeds expenditures. And it's that clause, that phrase, review of all bond proceeds expenditures, that is the second of 2 parts of why I have raised extensive issue with this, is because I do not see all bond proceeds expenditures anywhere other than the trial balance as represented by city staff. And when I look at that, all I can see is a description of expenditures. I can't actually review the expenditures because I can't look at any underlying documents. And now I do agree with the city staff's position that it would be unreasonable for us to be reviewing all underlying documents. The auditor doesn't even do that. But you know, there does come a point when a pattern of errors presents itself that further inquiry is necessary. And revenue measure is a 48 million over the life of it, a 48 million incurrence of indebtedness. And that indebtedness should be taken very seriously. I believe the city council and the city staff are stewards of the public dollar. And as stewards of the public dollar, I believe they owe a certain level of care when it comes to accounting for and managing that dollar.
Commissioner Reynolds, I apologize for your previous admonitions, but I'm going to break in here. You have absolutely no substantiation. You have no substantial evidence whatsoever to make. Excuse me, don't step over me. Please don't step over me and let me finish. You haven't made a single, you don't have no evidence whatsoever to make allegations that the city hasn't done an exemplary handling of this. And further, I'm going to correct an error that you made. It doesn't matter what the intent of the original council was that adopted this ordinance. The statutory rules or canons of statutory construction of the law.
I'm going to call this meeting to order again. I would ask that all comments be reserved until the committee has had time to have this.
And I'm sorry, I'm gonna interrupt and interject to put on the record that you're making allegations that have no substantiation whatsoever, no substantial evidence whatsoever of any misappropriation or a malfeasance of the city's application and administration of this bond deal. Okay, so I'm going to put that on the record for this purpose. Now you can continue with your deliberations.
Back to the discussion amongst the committee, Mr. Hale did just use the word allegations. And so I want to circle back for a second and point out that I have not made allegations. I've only made observations of what I've reviewed and made recitations of what I have heard. So in full disclosure, I did have a approximately 1 hour to 1.5 hour meeting with Mayor Lee the week after our last committee meeting. I have also had extensive discussions with Council Member Miller since the last meeting. No other council members pursuant to the Brown Act. I have not had discussions with any of my fellow committee members. But I have had extensive discussions with Mayor Lee, city staff, Councilwoman Miller. So I have had the opportunity to hear everyone's perspectives and different inputs. And, you know, financials can become very convoluted. And so I really just want to simplify it back to K14, the language of statute, the part about the street construction designated fund, and the part about the annual review of all bond proceeds expenditures. Keeping it simple and limiting it to, you know, the clauses of this section of this statute, we should be able to reach certain conclusions. And so the auditor is available here for questions and comments. I did want to have some discussion before we, you know, started making inquiry with the auditor. And I'm finished with my piece there. Would any other committee members like to make comments? Okay, would any other committee members like to ask questions of the auditor who's present? Okay. So, while I do believe that there are a lot of questions that would be valuable to ask of the auditor, and I prepared a list of questions, I don't want that discussion to impact the clear-eyed, narrow-focused view on K14. And so I would just ask my fellow committee members if they feel like the city is in compliance with the requirement that a separate account called Street Construction Designated Fund be created. Is there anyone who feels like that requirement has been satisfied and that they can make a good and honest statement that it was?
Well, I think with all due respect, you brought up some interesting perspectives. I myself did not see, although I probably did not go in depth as you did in reviewing. I did not see a pattern of errors. I really didn't. We saw the one that was that we talked about today, but those things happen. I myself just, and I'm very new to this, and I'm trying to follow, and I'm trying to figure out exactly what my role is here. And I'm definitely not an auditor. But I do feel comfortable in what was provided to me. And I'm not saying, you did bring up some interesting, you know, thoughts. But I'm not quite sure where you really, what you are suggesting we should do.
That is a great question. So you know, I should have actually taken the initiative to comment on what I personally think we should do. So what I think we should do is I think we should adopt the report as submitted as it pertains to measures X06 and F20. I think that we should provide additional direction to staff, simply with a comment from the committee says that the committee does not feel that they have sufficient and accurate information to determine whether or not the city is in compliance with K14. So I'm not suggesting that we are, and we don't know if the city is in compliance or not. I don't. So I'm not suggesting that we come out here and say, you know, they're not compliant. I'm simply suggesting we say that we can't reach a determination on that issue.
So Jonathan, having been on the old committee with Ann, what is it exactly that you want from the K14 that you can't see? I mean, do you think that they're using the funds for something different than what's there, or you just can't tell?
So it's that I can't tell. And, you know, I'm reluctant to take it to the next step about, you know, I think they're spending it on something else. I don't want to go there. I have no knowledge. It's that I can't tell. And that comes to the accountability requirement and what our job is. You know, our job is to be able to tell. We represent the public. So, you know, if we can't tell, how do we assure the rest of the community that everything's in good shape? You know,
So you want them to
if
give
we were to
you-
vote yes right now, If everyone voted unanimously yes, I would ask, after that vote, do you feel like you did a public service? Do you feel like you're
So
representing?
you want them to give you more line items of exactly what is K-14? That's what you want, that specifically says this is for the roads only.
Well, and potentially a review of underlying documents to the extent that there are discrepancy between transaction descriptions and the organization of the accounts and payments. But I don't think that anything can be done for the purpose of this year, and the decision we make is not dispositive of anything. We provide a report and findings and our advice to the city council, and the city council will do with it what they will. And so, us declining to adopt the K-14 portion of the report wouldn't impede the city's ability to approve the budget and move forward. And then for maybe next year, we would, in the interim, be able to resolve some of those things that would allow, at least me personally, to feel confident and comfortable with saying, yes, I have reviewed this. I did look in great detail at the transactions. They all for street improvements. The fund is titled in the appropriate nomenclature, and adopting it. I know that my vote today would not be to adopt the report as it pertains to K-14, and it's just out of principle that if I don't understand it and can't ascertain it, I can't say yes and put my name on it. But that would be my suggestion, is that we adopt it with respect to X06 and F20, and provide additional comment, which is that the city cannot ascertain, or that the committee cannot ascertain whether or not the city is in compliance with the requirements of K-14 based on the information presented.
Chair Jonathan, if the city doesn't have an account called the Street Construction Designated Fund, what do you have a name on the fund?
Yes. So if you look in the 174-page fiscal report, the fund is called Street Rehabilitation. Let me get to the exact page for it. I'm using my Control F feature. Street Rehabilitation and Repair Fund. And you'll find it on page 42 of 174. And so that is the nomenclature they have used to serve the purpose of K-14. And sure, nomenclature, is not imputing any ill intent on anybody, but the impact of the wrong nomenclature, as I mentioned before, is I had to go search and hunt to find what was the equivalent of the Street Construction Designated Fund. I had to really hunt for it. This being a volunteer committee that meets once a year, composed of select members of the public, should not have to go hunt for that information. The city has a duty to present it to us in a way that allows us to perform our oversight role without further complications. And had the information been presented in that format, I do not think we would be here at this special meeting today.
Okay.
And and this committee is going to exist in the future. It's existed before. Same for the city council. But if we don't catch this issue and cause it to be corrected now, the next committee, composed of different members, is going to have the same issue and have to do the same inquiry if they get there. And so I think it's really important, while we have caught this issue of misnomenclature, that we have the city correct it. So moving forward, it's a non-issue. We never have to have that discussion again. And future committees are able to more readily review what's been presented and make a determination about the city's compliance or non-compliance.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to jump in on the issue of the name because I think it's appropriate for staff to respond to this at this time. So thank you for that indulgence. So first, I wanted to reiterate for the record what Mr. Hale said, that there is no pattern of errors in the information submitted to the committee in this report and in previous years through the audit process. So just for the record, that is the statement. We've had 6 months of audit process to get to this audit, and our auditor has done a diligent job in making sure of that. On the issue of the name, the street construction designated fund. I appreciate the conversation there, and I appreciate looking back at the ballot measure from 2014. And you're right, Mr. Chair. Neither I nor the city attorney nor the city clerk were here in 2014. Neither was anybody on this committee here in this committee in 2014. So that is the literal reading of the ballot measure. You're absolutely correct. And we acknowledge that the fund that was created, which is Street Rehabilitation and Repair Fund, does not have that nomenclature. You are correct in that. It is a separate fund. It is walled off from the rest of our funding sources and only for local streets. So we meet the requirement, but the nomenclature is not correct. You are correct on that point. As staff, we would have no objection if the committee wished to recommend to the council that that name be changed going forward to match the name in the K-14 bond measure. That would not be, we have no objection to that as staff, and that's ultimately the approval of the council. If the committee wished to recommend that, that could be something that you consider doing. And then ultimately, what's before the committee is to recommend that the council accept the oversight report. That is the action before your committee. We're bringing the report to the council on January 10th, along with the audited financial statements. The action before the committee is to consider recommending the council accept the report on January 10th. And lastly, in terms of further review of additional financial details, if the committee as a group wish to consider that by motion, that is something you can put forth, but ultimately that is the direction of the city council. They will need to decide that, not staff, not the committee, but the city council will need to decide that as part of the purview of this committee operating as a subordinate body of the city council.
Thank you, Mr. Bronson. So, he raised his contention about there is not a pattern of errors, and that's an opinion. It's my opinion that there is. It's the city's opinion that there's not. It's just an opinion, and that's. I appreciate Mr. Bronson conceding on the nomenclature because that one is not an opinion. That's one that matters as a matter of fact. But with the report as submitted now, the financial report does use the wrong nomenclature. And so on that note, we couldn't adopt the report as submitted in its entirety because the nomenclature issue would have to be addressed. So there's at least one revision that must be made. And then the second question is just whether each committee member has felt that they have done a review of all bond proceeds expenditures, and whether they feel like they understand the information that city staff has been presented to them. Do you understand it? Do you know it? And, with what's presented, are you able to look at the language of the statute and the sections of the report and say, yes, the statute says we need to do A, and on the report, I see A is here. Do you feel like you have done what we were charged to do, and do you feel like you have done a public service?
I think we should listen. I think we should listen to the at least Karen anyway. She's got her hand up here, so
Right.
I think we should.
Oh yeah, please.
And Deanne also has her hand up.
Sorry, I have not looked at the hands up feature. That is my mistake. I apologize. Please, committee member Cass.
Thank you very much. As a new member, I am also trying to understand what we're doing and what I'm charged to do as well. I feel that some of this is a growth issue by the city of Grover Beach, which has millions more dollars to deal with now than they ever did before. And now we have 3 bonds here that need to be segregated, where in the past we had only the K-14. So I see that as more of our direction also, is to ask that staff better clarify between the 3 issues. There are 3 bond measures, and then use corresponding language so that when we do receive this, we will be able to identify it. I feel a little challenged about can I really contest that I've done everything I should here. I'm not sure I could say that. I've done the best I can with what I know so far. And I personally do not feel that there is a pattern of inaccuracies. So I could move forward with the direction and recommendations of the committee.
And so with Ms. Cass, was that you would adopt the report as submitted without comment on the nomenclature or et cetera?
I would request that either if it's necessary now or in a move forward for next calendar year or fiscal year, which we're on both, I guess, to adjust the names to appropriately reflect the accounts in which each of the fund measures will be deposited and withdrawn from.
Okay, great. So so that is you would want to direct some revision. Are there any committee members who would like to motion to adopt the report as submitted? I understand that, you know, we're all 5 individuals and your opinions may be different than mine. So if you would simply like to move to adopt it as submitted, please do so. And if no one does so, I can only take that as kind of a consensus that we do want to provide some direction.
I make a motion to adopt it as submitted.
Yeah, I think that I would be willing to do that too, although I do agree that, you know, the recommendation that the city manager, I think he used the wording and Ms. Cash used the wording, just perfectly. I feel exactly like Ms. Cass, I believe.
Members of the committee, I'm sorry to interrupt, but under rules of parliamentary procedure, you have a motion on the floor. You need a second. So one of you needs to second the motion if your intent is to go forward with the motion that's on the floor, and then you can have discussion.
This is Karen Cass, and I second the motion that's on the floor.
All right, you have a first and seconded motion on the floor. You can now discuss if you desire.
So the
Can
motion
the
on the
city-
floor is to adopt the report as submitted with no comments, no revisions, no further direction.
Can the city put the report, what we're to be approving up on the screen?
Yes, we can do so. I'll ask the city clerk if she can open up item number 3, which has the report. And again, as part of the motion, if the committee wished to recommend that the council take action to change the name of this fund going forward, that could be part of the motion that's made by the committee, and staff would reflect that in the agenda materials going to the council on January 10th.
Can
And
I
to be clear, the current motion though is to adopt the report as submitted without further comment. That's the current motion.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
Yes.
So I know we have Aaron Nagel, our auditor here, and I'm a little concerned about changing the name of the fund at this point. I know we've consistently reported this in all of our financial reports, and I'm wondering is it easier to change something in the ordinance so that we wouldn't we'd lose our consistent reporting of the name if someone were to go back and look at our financial reports from previous years. I think that would maybe lead to some confusion. I just want to bring that up, and I want to maybe get our auditor to maybe say something on the changing of a name of a fund that has been consistently used over the years.
Hi, yes, this is Erin, the auditor, and I can kind of give an intro, but to answer Deanne's question, generally what we've seen in practice and also what GFOA is the Government Finance Officers Association, as well as the GASB, which is the Government Accounting Standards Board, dictates the rules that we're following under governmental generally accepted accounting principles. And I do agree with what Deanne said in that that could lead to more confusion if you change a fund name, because historically it will be under the road and repair, and I'm paraphrasing, but the existing name of the fund. However, there could be going forward some language added to the footnote for the description of that fund that specifically calls out more language or more detail, so that there is context behind the name of the fund. But it would at least allow the name to remain the same as a header of that fund throughout the statements. But again, management and the city, you have leeway in the footnotes of what you put in there as a description of that fund, which would allow you, I think, to accomplish what you're wanting to do.
So
I'd
those are
also
very
like to-
insightful points, and I just want to make a note here that sometimes, unfortunately, the society we live in is one that's controlled by law as opposed to practicability and reason. And unfortunately, for this particular instance, the law does say that the fund must bear a particular nomenclature. That fund does not bear the particular nomenclature. And even if there was a change to the fund, it doesn't resolve the history of noncompliance. And
I'm going to respectfully disagree, Chair.
Well, I'm going to finish, but thank you. And regarding the impact it could have on future accounting, that is something to consider. But the change, if anything, would be an indicator to future people reviewing of a period of reformation when the city started redoing its books. And without any reformation, and it continues like this in perpetuity, there's little room for improvement.
I'm going to respectfully disagree. I think there's been numerous erroneous statements made here in the context of what the law requires. The law is an ordinance. There was a title defined for this particular fund. The fund was created. The process under state law and under local regulations has been totally complied with. The only issue that's being made here is the name. And courts will typically bypass nomenclature issues when in fact you've complied not only substantially, but entirely with the law, with the exception of the nomenclature issue. You have every legal right, members of this committee, to approve this document, or at least recommend approval of this document. And the nomenclature is not a legal issue in my mind.
So can we get the report up? We have to get what we're agreeing to. I mean, the pictures and the title isn't helpful. Okay.
And this was the report sent out to the committee as well in the agenda packet.
Oh, wait a minute. Can you leave it at page 1, which is our statement? This is a message from the Citizen Oversight Committee that we have to agree to. Well, I don't particularly care what the name of the account is, but it seems that in the future, when a measure says an account should be a certain name, that it should be probably used. That's my opinion. I don't care that it's changed, but.
Thank you. And I appreciate you bringing the attention to that message from the Oversight Committee. I actually had not put too much time into this, but on the first paragraph, the last sentence, the committee's job is to carry out the principal duties of ensuring that revenues from these measures have been expended for the purposes set forth in the ballot language, reporting progress annually to the public, and providing a compliance statement. So we have determined the nomenclature is non-compliant. But so now it's a question of whether or not everyone here feels like they can do a good and honest endorsement of the report.
Can we get that back?
It's okay. I won't read them. I'll ignore them.
Come on.
Well, the opinion has not gone unknown.
Right.
But yeah, so it
Well,
does say
in the
compliance statement. So does everyone feel like 100% compliance has happened?
in the past, when Paula and I on the committee, we have asked them to eliminate some things that we didn't agree with. So if you have something, this is the message that they're going to print with our names on it. So if you have a problem with that last sentence, you can eliminate the ballot language, the ballot language.
Oh, no problem with the sentence. I'm just pointing out that that is what we're charged with doing, is we are charged with providing a compliance statement.
Yeah, but the name of the account is
that's only one part.
I mean, that's an explanation that is satisfactory to me from the city. That fine, but in the future, they might want to look at ballot language and name accounts appropriately. So we're back to the message.
So Anne, you want that to be in this statement that they need to rename the ballots?
No, I don't care what the name of the account is. I understand that it is not what the ballot language said, but I don't care what the name of the account is. But if someone is making a motion to change it, I would probably agree, but it just doesn't matter. They've explained that the name of the account is this, so that's fine. So does it bother you that it's not the same, Paula?
It doesn't bother me. I think it's fine. Like I said, we only used to review K-14, so that was easy to just
know.
Review. Now that there's more, it's
well, the easy part of the committee is those other two tax measures. This has always been the one that has the most things that we have to look at. So I am fine with the other two measures. I think that we agreed that last meeting, and I would never think that there is a pattern of errors with the city of Grover Beach. I am a fan, so I cannot agree with that at all. But I want to make sure that what this message from me says is what I think. So if you want to go line by line on this and change wording, I'm sure the city would agree. They have in the past, and then we can be done unless there is more information that you're looking for.
Those are very insightful comments. Could the whoever's doing the share screen, could they turn to page 5 of that report? So this is the page of the report that concerns K-14, which is the revenue measure that we're having discourse on. So here it reveals that there was $2.7 million in expenditures, capital expenditures from the bond proceeds during the fiscal year, and 1.6 million in non-capital expenditures. And the trial balance attached to the report is a representation of all K-14 expenditures according to city staff. And if you calculate the sum of those expenditures, it unfortunately does not equal 3.191 million, which is what's included on the trial balance.
I think I can answer that for you.
Sure.
What you're looking at is an accumulated balance from inception to date. So our trial balance, when we're looking at revenues and expenditures, just cover 1 year. So when you're looking at the 1.6 for the non-capital expenditures, you can see prior non-capital expenditures are 1.4 million. So you're
Oh,
looking,
great.
you're
It's the
not comparing
197
apples to
number.
apples. What was that?
Right. So it's that 197 number we need. So it's the 197 and the 2.7 million number. And
So
the sum of those numbers is also not the total expenses for the fiscal year for K-14 on the trial balance.
So we've just included the revenues, the bond proceeds, and the interest at the top. And we have netted some of the revenues that were received for some of the expenditures we received from some of the, for example, a sidewalk. Sometimes the residents will pay extra, or they'll pay a portion to have a sidewalk in front of their house. And so we've netted that portion of the revenue with the expenditure, because really it just kind of reduces the cost of the project. So that's why you're not seeing, if you look at the bottom line, our current year ties, our fund balance ties, it's just the way that it's reported. We're required to report it a certain way on our CAFR versus this report. It's not an annual financial report that has a certain way that we report it. And we're also using this, like I said, inception to date. So you're not going to be able to compare it to our annual financial report, because this includes everything.
But so on page 5 under capital expenditures, where it says FY 2020-2021 expenditures. So that is apples to the trial balance is apples, correct? Those are both apples, right?
Well, what I'm saying though is if you want me to show you how we came up with that number, if you take the expenditures for the projects, the 2.7 million, there's a $474,000 difference between the 3.191 million. The difference is 28,500 miscellaneous revenue and transfers in of 248,000, which gets netted against those expenditures. Because to be consistently reporting,
miscellaneous revenue was deposited into the account where the bond proceeds are held?
Yes, because it's part of the projects. It's part of, so the project costs for Measure K-14, these some of these street projects, there are residents that will pay for part of, to have, and I probably need the Public Works Director here, somebody to explain exactly, or project manager, but it's my understanding that sometimes the residents will pay into some of these projects to have, Matt, I don't know if you can help me, but a concrete sidewalk versus asphalt, or, or they pay into the project, right? I mean, it's part of the Measure K-14. We wouldn't put it into our general fund because it covers part of the project.
That's correct. We do get the cost reimbursement for concrete work for driveways, street conforms, sidewalks as part of the project, and that gets reimbursed because it's part of the K-14 expenditures. We just get that funding privately.
Okay, and so these projects have numbers on them, and as everyone I believe is familiar with, one of these report requirements is the status of current projects. So with these project numbers, and I believe Ms. Ratana did a great job of explaining this last time, but on the trial balance, under the section to the right of the vendor, I believe that's where she included certain citations to the project numbers. Let me take another look and make sure.
You're talking about the general ledger detail, not the trial balance.
Oh, sorry. Please excuse my mistake, because every time I refer to the trial balance, I have meant the general ledger detail. So please excuse that mistake on my part. So I'm in the transaction detail report, and I'm looking for the project numbers. And okay, so under PSE, plan specifications and engineering, on that the detail report, that is the first instance I see of project numbers being assigned to the transactions. And I guess I would inquire as to whether or not only those transactions that are cited with the project number are transactions for those projects, or whether or not the transactions that do not have citations to the project number are also for the project.
I'm sorry, what page are you on?
I am on page 18 of 25, and scrolling up to, scrolling down rather.
And just for reference to the committee, this particular report is not part of the annual report that will be go to the council. This is the detail list for the committee's review that you're discussing, and not on the motion on the floor.
Right. So, okay, there. Okay, yes. So on page 18 of 25, the category for plans, specifications, and engineering is, from my review, the first instance where the project numbers are included on the row. So you see 2295-10 is the first transaction there.
Mm-hmm.
But on all transactions prior to that, I do not see any citation to a project number.
So normally it gets charged to the project is, you can see that program 900. It says, and I think that's where you're citing the account number is 20-900. That is our
the 2295-11. So under where it says balance forward.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the account number that you're starting with that says PSE plan specifications and engineering.
Oh, yes, my apologies.
Yeah, so normally that account code, that 20, and I think I might have, we talked about programs last time, but program 900 is our CIP, our project coding. So anything that goes to project or to program 900 should have a project code attached to it.
So to my colleagues, you see on the report that's on the screen those project numbers and certain sums next to those project numbers. And I've pointed out in this transaction detail where we begin seeing those project numbers. Is there anyone else on the committee who is concerned as to why the other transactions aren't tied to a project number? Okay, well, so the motion on the floor right now is to adopt the report as submitted with no further directions, comments, or changes at all. And I do believe that at least 3 of us indicated some degree of change. But so there's a motion on the floor to adopt the report as submitted with no changes, and I guess we all need to make a vote now. My vote on that is going to be no.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Okay. Committee member Tripp,
Yes.
committee member Cass,
Yes.
committee member Della Rosa,
Yes.
Vice Chair Holden,
Yes.
Chair Reynolds.
No. Okay, so we have a decision, and the committee has moved to adopt the report as submitted without further directions or comments. And at this time, our committee business is done for this fiscal year.
And just to wrap up this item, Chair and committee members, we will share this with the council on January 10th. We will report the vote as taken by the committee, and we will be sharing the report as drafted. And The committee's next meeting would be held in late 2022, following the completion of the audit process for fiscal year 21-22, and we would communicate with the committee in advance of that over the course of calendar year 2022. And we thank the committee for its service in this capacity.
I thought we were trying to reconvene in the spring for 2 meetings next year. I believe city staff indicated last time that because the committee has been merged, that it wanted to do 2 meetings, one in the spring, one in the fall.
We will clarify that direction with the council as part of the item that we send to them on January 10th, and pending that confirmation, we will then schedule a meeting in the springtime as a precursor for the formal audit review discussion that the committee will do as part of the K-14 process in the fall.
Oh, and Ms. Sims, I did notice that I didn't have access to the recording of the last committee meeting. I'm not in the Grover Beach SharePoint or whatever. But if someone could be so kind as to get me the downloaded copy of this, that would be awesome.
We can post it on the website.
Okay, that's where I clicked for the last one, but it said that my email wasn't associated with your SharePoint, so I wouldn't give me access.
Oh, no, I'll post it on the actual website, like where I post the agendas and the minutes. We'll post a link there for the public.
Okay. Well, if no comments or questions from anyone else, then we are adjourned.
No, thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Thank you. Man.
What's the difference between this and fucking hurricanes? Piece of shit. Hypocritical piece of shit. I always say that stuff. Kentucky and Tennessee. Yes,
Pecans or
cashews. Yes, there was. just like everything else, Mom. It's like all these freaking people are against abortions and all this other stuff until they get their freaking nipples knocked off. Trump did too. Trump said don't give any. I mean, it was disastrous. It's all Democratic states. It's like a line up. I just feel so helpless. You never wish I was a famous person.
You talked to Saul? Saul left a message or started to leave one. Dude, you talked to Saul?